Breaking news. Senior BBC journalists have just leaked classified government recordings that Starmer desperately tried to suppress. Unprecedented media crisis. At 8:47 a.m. today, 3 veteran BBC producers simultaneously published explosive audio files containing cabinet-level discussions about manipulating economic data. Every damning word preserved with perfect clarity. Ministers openly discussing how to conceal rising unemployment figures. Treasury officials admitting inflation calculations were deliberately altered. And most shocking of all, Starmer himself instructing, find a way to make these numbers disappear before Parliament sees them. Within minutes, armed police stormed BBC headquarters. Computer systems seized. Journalists detained. Broadcasting temporarily suspended for the first time since World War II. Metropolitan Police Commissioner forced to admit the raid was ordered directly by Downing Street with no judicial oversight. And as this crisis unfolds, Britain's international reputation for press freedom lies in tatters. If you want to understand how this unprecedented attack on media independence could trigger constitutional collapse, hit that subscribe button now because events are accelerating by the minute. Here's what sparked this extraordinary assault on Britain's public broadcaster. Last month, a routine Freedom of Information request from BBC economics editor Faisal Islam uncovered a statistical anomaly in government employment figures. Not major fraud, not obvious manipulation, just inconsistencies that didn't match other economic indicators. Islam did exactly what good journalists do. He investigated further. He filed additional requests. He consulted independent economists. He approached Treasury officials for comment. All standard journalistic practice. But the response was anything but standard. First came unusual delays, then official obstruction. Finally, direct warnings from Downing Street press officers about national interest concerns if the story proceeded. Most news organisations might have hesitated. The BBC pushed forward, assigning 2 additional senior journalists to the investigation. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the entire BBC News division, not just statistical manipulation, but evidence of systematic distortion of economic data across multiple departments. Not minor adjustments, but fundamental misrepresentation of Britain's economic performance. As they prepared to broadcast their findings, a remarkable source emerged, a senior civil servant so disturbed by what they'd witnessed that they provided actual recordings of cabinet discussions. These weren't just explosive, they were potentially government-ending. The content of these recordings has left economic and legal experts stunned. In the first audio file, Chancellor Rachel Reeves can be heard discussing unemployment figures with Starmer and Cabinet Office Minister Pat McFadden. The real numbers are catastrophic. Reeves admits, if these get out before the local elections, we'll lose every marginal council. Starmer's response is chilling. Then they can't get out. Simple as that. When Reeves suggests this might require manipulating Office for National Statistics data, Starmer dismisses the concern. The ONS works for the government. Make it clear what's expected. Most damning is his explicit instruction. Parliament can get the corrected figures after the elections. In another recording, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds openly discusses revising inflation calculations to exclude energy and food, the 2 categories most affecting ordinary citizens. The headline number looks much better if we adjust the basket of goods, Reynolds explains. When an unidentified voice raises concerns about economic transparency, Starmer cuts them off. The average voter doesn't understand economic statistics. They understand the numbers we give them. The deliberate deception isn't just shocking, it's potentially criminal. Former Cabinet Secretary Lord O'Donnell appeared on Channel 4 News explaining the severity. Manipulating official statistics isn't just breaking ministerial code. It potentially violates the Statistics and Registration Service Act, a criminal offence. Legal experts are already discussing whether these recordings meet the threshold for misconduct in public office charges. This isn't political disagreement. This is evidence of potentially criminal deception at the highest level of government. The government's response was swift and unprecedented. At 9:14 a.m., just 27 minutes after the recordings appeared online, armed police from the Metropolitan Police Counter-Terrorism Command entered BBC Broadcasting House in central London. Not regular officers, heavily armed specialists normally deployed for terror threats. They presented a document titled Executive Security Direction, signed personally by Home Secretary Yvette Cooper. No judicial warrant, no court, oversight. Employees described scenes reminiscent of authoritarian regimes, journalists ordered away from computers, phones confiscated, entire floors placed under police control. BBC Director General Tim Davie was reportedly given 5 minutes to comply or face arrest for compromising national security. When Davie demanded to see a court order, officers informed him they were operating under special powers that required no judicial approval. By 10 a.m, BBC News had been forced off air, replaced with a holding screen citing technical difficulties. Online news services went dark. The BBC World Service, which continued broadcasting from international locations, described the situation as a direct government attack on press freedom, unprecedented in British democratic history. When police finally departed at 2:45 p.m, they took with them servers, hard drives, and the personal devices of 34 journalists. Most chilling of all was the parting warning from the commanding officer. Overheard by multiple BBC staff, broadcasting or further distributing these recordings will result in immediate arrest under the Official Secrets Act. Britain, a country that lectures others about press freedom, had just conducted a raid on its public broadcaster that would shame even the most authoritarian regimes. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens watching this assault on press freedom reacted with absolute horror. Janet Williams, a 69-year-old retired teacher from Bristol, told local reporters, "I lived through the miners' strike, the poll tax riots and the Brexit chaos. I've never seen anything like armed police entering the BBC." Robert Thompson, a solicitor in Birmingham, expressed professional outrage. Using counter-terrorism powers to suppress journalistic investigation is textbook authoritarianism. This is how democracies die. Press freedom organisations immediately condemned the action. Reporters Without Borders issued an emergency statement placing the UK on its press. Freedom Watch list alongside Hungary and Turkey. The National Union of Journalists called for emergency protests outside Parliament. While ordinary citizens and journalists face this unprecedented attack on fundamental freedoms, government ministers enjoy continued protection, power and privilege. Special advisors were spotted entering Downing Street through the back entrance, presumably to craft damage control messaging. The contrast is so stark, so fundamentally disturbing, that even traditional Labour supporters expressed disgust. Former Labour Home Secretary Lord Blunkett didn't mince words on Radio 4. "I never thought I'd see a Labour government use police powers to suppress BBC journalism. This is a dark day for the party I served. This isn't politics anymore. This is the systematic dismantling of democratic norms." Polls hastily conducted today show 82% of respondents calling the raid deeply concerning or frightening, including 74% of Labour voters. The damage isn't just political. It's a profound breach of the social contract between government and citizens in a free society. But then something extraordinary happened that sent shockwaves through the entire British establishment. At precisely 3:30 p.m, King Charles took the unprecedented step of summoning the Prime Minister to Buckingham Palace. Not a scheduled weekly audience, not a ceremonial meeting. An emergency summoning with language not used in modern times. The sovereign requires the immediate attendance of the Prime Minister. Royal experts were stunned. This formal command, last used by George VI during the 1945 constitutional crisis, represents the most serious exercise of remaining royal prerogative. Palace sources revealed that before issuing the summons, Charles consulted with 5 former prime ministers and the most senior judges in the land. When Starmer arrived, he was reportedly kept waiting for 17 minutes, itself a significant royal rebuke, before being ushered into the King's private study without aids. What transpired in that meeting remains private, but witnesses describe Starmer emerging looking ashen and visibly shaken. Within the hour, Metropolitan Police issued a remarkable statement. Following advice from Crown Prosecution Service, all materials seized from the BBC have been returned. No further action will be taken regarding publication of the recordings in question. Most tellingly, the statement specifically noted this decision was made in light of constitutional advice received from appropriate authorities, diplomatic language for royal intervention. Former royal correspondent Jenny Bond explained the extraordinary significance. The King has effectively forced the government to back down using the nuclear option of his rarely deployed constitutional authority. Former Supreme Court Justice Lord Sumption put it more bluntly on Newsnight. We have just witnessed the sovereign directly intervening to protect press freedom from government overreach. This hasn't happened in living memory. The international reaction was immediate and damning. Within hours, Britain faced unprecedented criticism from traditional allies. The US State Department expressed serious concerns about press freedom in the United Kingdom. The European Commission announced a formal review of the UK's compliance with European press freedom standards. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz cancelled a scheduled meeting with Starmer, citing concerning developments regarding media independence. The UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression issued an emergency statement requesting immediate clarification of police powers used against journalists. International broadcasters including CNN, Deutsche Welle and Al Jazeera led with the story, showing armed officers entering the BBC images that would normally be associated with authoritarian regimes, not Western democracies. The International Press Institute described the raid as a shocking assault on press freedom that places Britain alongside Hungary and Turkey in terms of media intimidation. Financial markets reacted swiftly to the governance concerns. The pound fell 3.2% against the dollar. Foreign investment funds placed UK assets under review, citing political risk reassessment. Global media companies with UK operations began contingency planning for potential government interference. One American network executive told the Financial Times, "We're discussing whether the UK remains a safe location for our European headquarters given these developments. The diplomatic damage wasn't just severe, it was potentially permanent. Britain's moral authority on democracy, human rights and press freedom has been fundamentally undermined." As former Foreign Secretary William Hague noted on BBC World Service, Britain cannot lecture other countries about press freedom on Monday and raid its own public broadcaster on Tuesday. Our international reputation may take years to recover. Inside Westminster, total paralysis has gripped what remains of Starmer's authority. Cabinet unity has completely collapsed, with ministers divided into warring factions. Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, responsible for media policy, was reportedly not informed of the raid before it happened, a constitutional outrage in itself. When she learned of the police action, sources claim she threatened immediate resignation unless all seized materials were returned. Attorney General Charlie Falconer, the government's senior legal officer, allegedly told colleagues the raid was legally indefensible and warned of personal liability for those who authorised it. Most significantly, Cabinet Office officials have initiated the Ministerial Propriety Protocol, a rarely used mechanism for addressing potential breaches of constitutional norms by serving ministers. WhatsApp groups with names like Constitutional Crisis Response and Government Survival Strategy are filled with panicked ministers and advisors trying to navigate unprecedented territory. One Whitehall insider described the atmosphere as constitutional meltdown. Senior civil servants are discussing their legal obligation to refuse ministerial instructions that violate constitutional principles, they revealed. "I've never seen government machinery come so close to open rebellion against elected officials. Most concerning of all, security services have reportedly begun contingency documentation, the process of recording ministerial instructions that may later be subject to legal challenge." Former constitutional advisor to the Cabinet Office, Professor Vernon Bogdanor, described the situation in stark terms. When officials begin documenting instructions for potential future inquiries, governmental authority is effectively broken. Ministers give orders that officials record but may not fully implement. This is governance collapse in slow motion. But here's the most explosive revelation that could deliver the final blow to Starmer's remaining authority. Multiple sources confirm the raid was conducted under Section 24 of the Counter-Terrorism Act emergency powers intended for imminent terror threats, not journalistic activities. According to legal experts, using these powers requires specific authorization documenting an immediate security risk. Documents seen by senior parliamentary sources reveal that Home Secretary Yvette Cooper signed this authorization despite explicit warnings from security officials that the situation did not meet statutory threshold for emergency powers. Most damning of all, sources claim the document contains a handwritten note from Starmer himself instructing, "Find whatever powers necessary to secure these recordings immediately." If this authorization document becomes public and journalists are reportedly already obtaining copies, it would prove Starmer personally directed the misuse of counter-terrorism powers to suppress journalistic evidence of his government's wrongdoing. Think about what that means. Not just economic data manipulation, not just press freedom violation, the deliberate weaponization of anti-terrorism legislation against Britain's public broadcaster. When directly questioned about this document, a Home Office spokesperson gave an answer that virtually confirmed its existence. Operational decisions regarding national security concerns are not subject to public comment. National security concerns for economic statistics. Former counter-terrorism legislation reviewer Lord Anderson called this justification deeply troubling on Sky News. Using national security as cover for suppressing politically damaging information is the behaviour of authoritarian regimes, not democratic governments. Meanwhile, opposition leader Rishi Sunak is orchestrating a masterful parliamentary response that further isolates Starmer. Instead of partisan attacks, Sunak has secured cross-party support for an emergency debate on press freedom and executive overreach. Standing alongside Liberal Democrat, Green, and even some Labour MPs outside Parliament, Sunak struck exactly the right tone. This transcends party politics. When fundamental freedoms are threatened, all Democratic representatives must stand united. He announced an unprecedented democracy protection motion, calling for immediate parliamentary inquiry into the raid, protection for the BBC journalists involved, and suspension of any minister connected to the authorisation. The motion has already secured support from over 30 Labour backbenchers, an extraordinary rebellion against Starmer's leadership. The contrast couldn't be more devastating. While Starmer tries to suppress information, Sunak champions transparency. While Labour fractures, Sunak builds democratic consensus. The political implications are seismic. Conservative polling has surged to a stunning 42%, with Labour collapsing to 24%. The Liberal Democrats have risen to 19% as traditional Labour voters seek alternatives that respect democratic norms. For the first time since the election, a Conservative-led government looks not just possible, but increasingly inevitable. Political analysts are already discussing the mechanics of a no-confidence vote when Parliament reconvenes tomorrow. The most remarkable aspect isn't just Labour's implosion, it's how quickly public opinion has shifted. 6 months ago, Labour enjoyed historic approval ratings. Today, betting markets give 90% probability to a government collapse within the week. Starmer has transformed from triumphant electoral victor to democratic pariah in less than 24 hours. With each passing hour of inadequate explanation, that collapse accelerates. The next 24 hours are absolutely critical for Britain's democratic institutions and constitutional stability. Parliament reconvenes tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. for what will be the most significant session in modern political history. The Speaker has granted an Starmer emergency debate on press freedom with unprecedented extended hours. Over 200 MPs have requested speaking time. The BBC Board of Governors has convened in emergency session to consider its response, including possible legal action against the government. The Supreme Court has cleared its schedule for potential emergency applications regarding executive powers. Civil liberties organisations are preparing mass demonstrations across major cities. Media organisations worldwide are sending senior correspondents to London to cover what the New York Times has already called Britain's constitutional crisis. Legal experts predict judicial review applications will be filed by morning challenging the legality of the raid. International press freedom organisations have requested UN monitoring of British media independence. The National Union of Journalists has called for a one-day strike across all UK news organisations in solidarity with the BBC. This isn't just a Westminster political crisis anymore. This is a fundamental question about whether Britain remains a functional liberal democracy. As Oxford constitutional scholar Professor Timothy Garton Ash noted on Newsnight, democracies don't die only through military coups. They die when elected leaders systematically undermine democratic institutions, exactly what we're witnessing in Britain today. At the epicentre stands Keir Starmer, a Prime Minister who, according to former Supreme Court Justice Baroness Hale, has in one action undermined press freedom, abused executive power, and damaged Britain's international standing as a democratic nation. So here's the question that matters. Will Starmer resign before Parliament reconvenes tomorrow? Will Britain's democratic institutions withstand this unprecedented assault? And has Starmer's government permanently damaged the country's international reputation for press freedom? What do you think? Has Britain crossed a dangerous line that cannot be uncrossed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. And if this story shocked you as much as it shocked us, share it with everyone who needs to understand the true gravity of today's events. The mainstream media, intimidated by government action, won't tell you the full truth about this constitutional crisis, but we will. And tomorrow, we'll reveal what senior BBC executives told their global counterparts about government threats made before the raid conversations that expose just how long this attack on press freedom has been planned. This isn't just about one government's survival, it's about whether Britain remains a country where journalism can hold power accountable without fear of armed police raids. The answer to that question will shape Britain's democracy for generations to come.